Hey guys, today I am bringing you my April wrap-up, and this video is being sponsored in part by HarperCollins, and this month I read a grand total of 2 books. I read 2 whole books this month. You know what? I'm not even ashamed of that because there are some people out there in the world that don't even read 2 books a year, and I read 2 books in a month. So what's up, suckers? But this is kind of unheard of in the booktube community. Most booktubers read like 5 to 10 books a month, and I'm over here like, yo, I read 2 whole books. Look at me go! But that's okay because I really enjoyed those 2 books that I read, so without further ado, let's talk about those 2 books. The first book I read this month was The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas, and this is a bind-up of the 5 novellas that come before the first book in the Throne of Glass series. But the thing is, this book did not feel like a novella bind-up, it just felt like its own book. Like, it just felt like its own story, it held its own, and I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I felt like I really got my money's worth with this book because it just felt like a book. It didn't feel like a bunch of novellas. The novellas come together and make this epic book, and I really liked that about this. I personally would not recommend reading this before Throne of Glass. There are definitely things that happen in this book that appear in the first book of the Throne of Glass series, but I don't think that this is a very good introduction to the world. I think the first book in the Throne of Glass series does a solid job at introducing you to the world and all the characters, and The Assassin's Blade is just a really nice installment to the Throne of Glass series, and it gives you more of a background on Selena, and I really enjoyed this book, and I'm glad that I took the time to read it. I do have a video review and discussion coming for this book, but the discussion video is like 2 hours long, so I really need to edit the crap out of it. Part of the reason why I wanted to read this and marathon the rest of the series is because I'm hosting an event with Sarah J. Maas herself, and I'm super pumped about it. It's taking place at the Barnes & Noble in Fenton, Missouri at 4:00 p.m. on May 10th. So if you're in the Fenton, Missouri area, come hang out. It's gonna be a party. It's gonna be a party. Hey, 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 hey. Then I read The Queen of the Tearling by Erika JOHANSEN, and this is the Booksplosion book of the month for April, and our live show is taking place on May 2nd at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you have read this book, definitely come join us. If you haven't, but you're going to read this book, then I will leave a link down below to our live show discussion when it goes live after we do the live show. That made sense, right? I hope that made sense. I really enjoyed this book. It was definitely a book that had its highs and its lows. So let me break it down for you. I'm gonna talk about the highs. The first thing that I really enjoyed about this book was the world. I found it to be very detailed and interesting, and I just found it to be the most engrossing part of the novel. Another thing that I really enjoyed about this book is that it doesn't have a romance. I don't remember the last time I read a young adult book that didn't have a romance. It was kind of refreshing reading this book and not having a subplot where there was a romantic aspect to it, because I felt like there were other parts of the story that were driving it along and it didn't need a romance, and it didn't have one, and I really appreciated that. This next thing is not necessarily a high or a low, it's just something that I wish I would have known going into this book, but it is definitely a very slow-paced book.
Slow. So slow. The slowest of slows, the slowest of slows.
Which again is not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing, I just wish I would have known going into it, so I would have been able to prepare myself for this
slowness.
Now let's talk about some of the lows. First up, I didn't find this book to be very enticing. There were moments of action and mystery, but I felt like this book focused more on building up this world rather than focusing on the story at hand. Another low is the characters. I really enjoyed the characters, but I also felt like they didn't stick out to me. I felt like the main character, Kelsey, was definitely the most striking character, but other than that, I felt like the side characters were a bit dry to me. So those are my thoughts on The Queen of the Tearling. While I had a good time reading this book, it definitely had its issues. So those are the 2 books that I read this month, which means that I now have to do a challenge because I did not complete the books on my TBR pile. If you're new here, I do this thing on my channel where I challenge myself to read a set amount of books within that month, and if I don't read those books, then I must do some sort of challenge. So let's find out what challenge I'm doing today. Scrolling, 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 aha! Sing the entire first page of your favorite book while stacking cookies on your head. Ah! Well, here's the deal. I don't got no cookies, but I'll stack some books on my head while I do this. I've got my favorite book, but I'm making an exception to this challenge because this page is long, so I'm just gonna read the first paragraph. Yep, that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, let's do this thing.
I had just come to accept that my life would be ordinary when extraordinary things began to happen. The first of these came as a terrible shock, and like anything that changes you forever, split my life into halves. Before and after, like many of the extraordinary things to come, it involved my grandfather, Abraham Portman.
The end. That's all you're getting from me. I only got 3 books stacked on my head, but I don't even care. Didn't even want to do it. I'm just embarrassing myself on the internet. So that's all I have for you guys today. I'm really hoping that I have a better reading month next month. We'll see what happens. You guys should let me know down below a book that you read last month that you absolutely loved. Let me know down below, and I will see you guys soon with a new video. Later. And, ooh, okay. The first book I read this month was, The Queen of the Twelve. But I felt like this book, did I have something in my teeth? I don't think I do.